We are back. We're back with our Fireside chats. And today we're really excited because we have one of our incoming graduate level social work interns, Nisan, who's on with us today. And he is a retired police officer. He's be talking with us about mental health and policing. This here is a very hot topic, but also just very essential. I know this is information that we all need. We want to make sure this message is elevated, so do us a favor and go ahead and press share, 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 share. Share this message out if you're watching us on Facebook Live. Go ahead and press share. If you're watching us on LinkedIn, hey, Arlene, great to see you there. If you're watching us on LinkedIn, go ahead and share as well. We want to uplift this conversation. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube at iRaise.org. And also, don't forget to follow me at Shaniqua E. Moore on all platforms Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. All right, let's get started. Now, if I mispronounce your name, I need you to correct me. Okay, can you do that?
Yes, I will.
All right. So Nyson,
Nice.
Nyson,
Yes.
Nyson is joining us. Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon, for your flexibility, your willingness, and just your time that you've served our communities in New York City. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I want to say a little bit about your bio, and then we're going to jump into some great questions. If you're watching us live from the audience and you have some questions that you want to ask, we will be taking them. So we will be monitoring the chat box. Of course, you can comment as well. We'll try to elevate your comments throughout this 30-minute chat. So Nyson was born on a little island in the Caribbean called St. Lucia, and he immigrated to the United States at 9 years old. He joined the United States Army, where he learned a lot about survival, but it was a difficult job for him after his deployment to Iraq in 2003, where he decided to take his life in a different direction. Nisan became a chaplain assistant where he enjoyed talking and helping soldiers, especially ones like him who were deployed to other dangerous countries. Nyson worked and served faithfully and diligently at the New York City Police Department for 17 years, where he's recently retired this year. While not working, he enjoys playing basketball and walking because of his healthy lifestyle involves being active. And he is currently a social work master level school social work intern at I Raise Girls and Boys. So everyone that is watching, I introduce to you Nyson. Again, thank you for being with us.
No, thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Anything I left out that you want to add in there, Nyson?
No, that sounds good.
Okay. Awesome. So let's jump into some questions. I first want to kind of learn what inspired you into the police force. What was some of the defining factors or influencing factors, whether it's a mentor or something you've seen that inspired you into the police force?
Well, to be quite honest, the first thing after leaving the military, I needed a job. And being in the military I was always outside in the field. So I wanted something that allowed me to also be outside and not particularly sit behind a desk. And, the commercial for law enforcement is always inviting and helping your community. So that was another aspect of it that I thought, well, I could be outside and I could help my community. So those two things fit in line for me. So I decided I was going to be a police officer.
I love it. And I love the transparency, definitely needing to work, but also wanting to help. And I think that is what has really fueled you throughout your career. So tell us a little bit about, there's been a lot of tension in communities of color with police and the way policing has been done, um, just historically in our nation, and especially in New York City. Tell us, in what ways do police work and social work intersect?
Well, you have two aspects of work where you're dealing with crime, and you're also dealing with a victim. So in dealing with a victim, you have an aspect of social work where you're dealing with someone that's been a victim of a crime, i.e., been a victim of a rape, been a
Yeah,
victim of robbery, been a victim of burglary. Any type of victim that you're dealing with, people have emotions to being a victim, and being the police officer on the scene, you have to kind of be there to help them deal with that type of anxiety or whatever it is, whatever emotions that they're feeling at the time. And that's one aspect of policing, dealing with the victim. The other one, a lot of police calls are people in distress, i.e., you're dealing with someone that's calling because they're having an issue with the family. You're having a mother that's having trouble dealing with her child, and she doesn't know where to go for help. So she dials those three magical numbers that she believes is going to solve all her problems, and
yeah.
that's where the police officer comes. So he's on the forefront of social work. He doesn't know he's doing social work until he gets himself that call, and he's or she is an automatic social worker.
Wow. That's so interesting. You said you don't know you're doing social work, but until you get that call. But what's also really interesting is that you had the keen ability to recognize families that were clearly in distress and that were dealing with anxiety versus resisting. Um, 'Cause you've seen so many instances where this has just gone so bad, where families have been in distress, whether there are mental health issues or challenges that that person has, or whether they're really having a flat on anxiety attack or a panic attack. And they're fearful and they're afraid. And so the fact that you were able to recognize the difference, I think, is really superb and says a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead. Jump in.
So, I, so the way it's handled and I could feel the community frustration with it because the way it's handled on an individual level, whereas a person coming in that has an idea of what he's dealing with will handle it a lot different than, let's say, someone that doesn't have an idea of what they're dealing with in a particular community. So a matter of police policy is what guides police officers in dealing with a lot of these situations, whether they call an ambulance for a person dealing with anxiety, or they arrest somebody that's acting erratically. So a lot of it has to do with the police officer's perception of it and the policy on how the policy dictates how the police officer handle those jobs. Um, so again, from a social work aspect, maybe more training in social work, maybe officers may rely less on using aggression or using force or calling an ambulance because maybe they have an idea of what it is they're dealing with and they're able to calm the situation and make it easier from that social work standpoint.
Yeah. I definitely love what you're saying. Wondering if you can give us a sneak peek into what are the policies that police officers are required to follow, that really sort of, guides their actions towards these types of scenarios?
So the policy is the policy, at least from the police department I worked in, was if there's a crime, arrest somebody. Um, you know, and generally the solution is arresting. Whereas sometimes I see arresting as something that could have a negative impact on an entire family. Arresting could probably possibly cause the father his job.
Yeah,
So the policy is mainly to enforce it or arrest it. If the person makes an inkling of a crime being committed, arrest the person. Whereas some disputes that don't necessarily need the person to be arrested.
yeah.
So that's a matter of policy shaping police. So the officer, he's listening not to help, but he's listening to see if a crime was committed so that he can make an arrest.
Wow. So the solution and the approach seems to be arresting. Um,
Yes.
are there any trainings that happen, internally where police officers understand the impact of making arrests on individuals when arrests shouldn't be made? So whether that's, you mentioned losing your job or the economic impact or the impact traumatically on the families that may be witnessing it or may obviously have to deal with it depending on how that case plays out. Are there trainings on that? Any sensitivity trainings that happens at all that you're privy to?
No, there's absolutely no training on life after an arrest. So once the arrest is done,
Wow.
the officer goes along his life, and the person suffers the consequences of the arrest. And the officer has no idea of how that one particular arrest affected that person's life or the family's life.
Wow. That's so scary. So that's so scary. Definitely, I think the gap that we see in communities between police um, and 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 the communities that they're serving or supposedly serving, why it's so large. Because if there is a disconnect from the experience and the reality of the people that you're arresting or you're working with, your approach is going to be exactly that. So I think it's really interesting to hear you say, "Absolutely not. There isn't." Very scary. Can you give us an instance where, you witnessed something on a job, that you felt was wrongful? You don't have to give anything that's, confidential, but maybe an example of a case where, you noticed arrest shouldn't have been made in that situation, and it was.
Um, I mean, I've seen it with like teenagers fighting, brothers and sisters fighting. New York raised the age, but before it was 16, you could have arrested kids for fighting. So brothers and sisters fighting each other, brothers scratched up, sisters scratched up, mother don't know what to do. She calls 911, and both kids are arrested, and both kids at that point get a criminal record for a fight, that brothers and sisters generally have, and they do have a little scratches. So when they have marks on the skin, the procedure was, hey, this an assault and there's marks, so somebody gets arrested. If both of them have marks, then both of them get arrested.
Mm,
So again, and that before they raise the age, that has an impact on a 16-year-old life who now has a misdemeanor assault on his record and have to forever say, hey, I have a misdemeanor assault. Got into a fight with my sister. So in terms of that, I've seen it. Um, and I've dealt with other cases where I thought arresting the person wasn't effective, and the department saw it and the another way. I had one instance with graffiti. Um, I decided I was going to make the kid clean the graffiti up, and they told me that was the wrong thing to do. The kid should have been arrested. So again, when when people don't see the impact of what an arrest does to people, they don't really take it into consideration. But again, that's department policy, compared to really trying to work with the individual and trying to do what's right for the community as a whole.
absolutely. And, my opinion, never a police officer, never wanna be, but, I think that was a great approach to accountability, responsibility to that child that was putting graffiti. That could have been their way of expressing themselves. Maybe that child has a talent and they don't have an outlet or a platform to express it. So they did it in their neighborhood, all right? So,
Well, maybe they're just kids doing what kids do, the
yeah.
foolishness. And you have to take that into consideration because, you don't get to 40 without passing 15 or 16. You have to pass those
That's
ages.
that's right.
So, and as you pass those ages, you look back and say, hey, I've done some silly stuff, but I
Oh,
just
yeah.
didn't get caught. I just didn't get caught.
Mm.
So, but if I got caught, what should my punishment be? Should it be throw me in handcuffs and throw me in jail, or should my punishment be, hey, take accountability for the mistake that you made and fix it from there. So
Yes. What are and I love what you're saying because teenagers are going to be teenagers, right? Kids are gonna be kids. A lot of adolescence is characterized by risky behavior, doing things like that. So what we've seen, the statistics show us is in certain communities, kids are not arrested at the same rates for doing the same things as kids of color. Have you seen this to be true in your work?
yeah, well, yeah, absolutely, and there are reasons for that. One of the reasons is that generally in community of colors, you have more police officers.
Yeah,
Our community tend to believe that more police officers help keeps us more safe. But with more police officers, you also get more enforcement.
mm,
And when you get more enforcement, more people in your community are going to feel that enforcement.
right,
So in a community where it's not our community, where they have less police officers, they're still
mm,
getting enforced, but on a much lower level. So chances are the kids are just not going to get caught because the officer has other things to do.
right.
Whereas in our community where there's so much police officers, then the officers have that kid to deal with, and he will deal with him as such. So that's one aspect of policing is the numbers.
Yeah. What are some better some, I guess, better techniques that could be used, or alternative measures to arresting that the police can employ with working in partnership with social workers?
So, well, instead of routing everything to the criminal justice system, the police department could route things to other agencies.
Okay.
Everything doesn't have to particularly be a fine or an arrest. It could be diverted. A family issue with families that's constantly arguing could be directed to a social worker that may prevent them. It may not work for everyone, but for few, it may be able to be helpful. So using the police to direct people to different resources would
Yeah.
probably be a better approach to policing, other than using the criminal justice system or the court system to dealing with issues in a community.
Yeah. I love that. So getting social workers more involved, doing more family work with families that are going through crisis. And that may just be that guidance and support from a social worker, from a professional that can guide them long term. Because I would assume arrest is a very short term strategy without really some type of preventive or just anything to allow that family have the support they need or that person in order to stop whatever that crime is, like understanding the root of the crime or the root of the issue, so that targeted interventions are effective.
So I think you said it right. Short-term solutions with long-term consequences for
Right.
the individual. So it's a short-term solution for the police officer. Hey, just arrest them. But for that individual, it have long-term consequences. And
Yeah.
again, that helps. That, in my opinion, helps to bring down the community, because if you start labeling people early, or you know, these arrests have consequences later on for a person in their life, looking
Right.
for a job. Something that they always have to mention. So it's a short-term solution for the police officer, throw the handcuffs on, with long-term consequences for the individual and in the community they live in.
Absolutely. And I love what you mentioned about re-diverting. So diverting some of those calls or whatever cases that are open over to other agencies. So it sounds like there has to be more collaboration across New York City agencies in order for that to happen, perhaps with the Department of Youth and Community Development and the Department of Mental Health, New York City Department of Education. And I'm sure there are probably talks with these commissioners that come together, but better ways, whether it's through streamlined technology or just more collaboration to make sure that those referrals actually happen or that there's an infrastructure for those referrals to actually be referred out to the right agency to take over that case.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely more. And again, department tries different things. They'll have a domestic violence officer with no real training on it's again a photo op, right? If you have domestic violence officers, they'll come visit your house, but they're not really solving the fundamental issue of what's happening with the family. So the 911 seems to be a call that everyone knows the number. So it seems to be, if I need help, I could get help from that number.
Right.
And that's what it should be. And if the police officer can't help you in that situation, he or she should be able to direct you in a direction that could help you. And the city needs to communicate. All cities, not just New York, need to have a line through the officer to help the communities. A parent having, sometimes parents just, they had enough with the kid. They don't know what to do. And then they say, you know what, I'm going to call 911. And that's what they do.
Right.
Not sometimes not knowing the consequences of calling 911 on their own child.
Yeah.
But as an officer and city resources, they're supposed to say, all right, you call 911. Here's what we could do for you. You're having trouble dealing with your child. We're gonna guide you in this direction.
Yeah.
Use them from now on. Don't try not to use 911. Try to use this resource, and hopefully they'll be able to help you sort the issue out with your child. So these are
Yeah.
the reasons. These are social work and policing do come hand in hand.
I agree 100%. I know there's been new models that Mayor Eric Adams has been looking to implement. One of those models is diverting 911 calls when there is a person clearly who has a mental diagnosis. Have you worked on that project at all, or can you tell us a little more about that?
Well, I mean, what I've read in the news has never been used.
Really? Supposedly, you're
so
supposed to start in
so
Harlem.
so it sound good in theory, but
Right.
reality, it was never really used. I think that was in the New York Post, I believe.
Yes,
They had an article about that program not being used. Um,
that's something.
yeah, again, part of the problem is there is a lot of calls for emotionally people in distress.
Yeah.
And you do have, the city's paying a lot of money for police officers, maybe $100,000 a piece per police officer, and they're everywhere. So they're more likely to be the first responding to anybody in with mental health, because they're the quickest one to reach to reach the person.
Right.
Um, I do think better training for our police officers to handle people with mental health issues, and they've, to the credit of NYPD, they have gotten better. Um, there was a time when I first got on dealing with someone with mental health. They said, just throw some handcuffs on them. You don't
Oh
want to
my
get hurt.
goodness.
Just throw handcuffs on them so you don't get hurt.
Wow.
Again, thinking of yourself, you're like, well, I don't want to get hurt, so I'm going to just throw handcuffs on this person before they make a move or they do anything irrational. I'm going to quickly, throw handcuffs on them. Again, that was the mindset. That was the training then. They've changed that to a more personal approach. Talking to the person, calming the person down. Trying to get the person willing to put on the handcuffs for their safety and yours, um, and waiting for an ambulance. So they've gotten better. They've gotten better with that approach. So there's still room for improvement. But as far as with so many calls for emotionally disturbed people, I don't know another agency that would be able to handle it, um, as or get there as quick as the police department, because they're already everywhere. I think it would be more so in training them to be better at dealing with people with mental health issues, and preparing them for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And someone just said, I agree with more advanced training for first responders. Approaching with empathy can make a world of difference. Did you want to comment on that at all?
So that was the last sentence you said.
So one person watching just says, I agree with more advanced training for first responders. Approaching with empathy can make a world of a difference.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Maybe, another way I could say it, you know, maybe having the fire department respond first before the police department. Use the police department as a last resort, because you do have a lot of EMTs out there that are working. So maybe switching the roles around and on who answers it might be better. But also giving them the training. It all comes down to the training. Also giving them the training to dealing with the mentally ill person.
Yeah. With the culture being so embedded in what it is and with the policies being what they have been historically for so many generations, do you see real change happening in terms of the culture of the NYPD adopting a model like this and handling communities with care and empathy?
No, I don't. And I'm going to be quite honest, I don't.
Thank you for your
Uh,
transparency. Tell us why.
because so being in it for the time I've been in it, I've been in it under the Bloomberg administrations.
Yeah.
I've been it under the Blasio administration and a little bit of Eric Adams, and in all the administrations, it the it remains constant. De
Mm.
Blasio, my opinion, I saw De Blasio try to change the culture a little, but the culture was just too strong for De Blasio. It made him
Wow.
public enemy number one.
Wow.
Um, so, and I kind of see the current mayor not wanting to be criticized, and is pretty much following similar policies that was not really beneficial to the community that looks like him. Although he talks really well, but in
Mhm.
terms of the policy, I haven't seen a change in policy under his administration.
Wow. So it sounds like these issues are so deep rooted, and you used the word and said, De Blasio tried, but the culture was just too strong for him. It's been this way for so many years, for so many generations. This thing precedes us,
It
precedes our
does.
grandparents. Like this has been policing has been a certain way in our nation for as long as we can remember. And so an approach to try to change the culture from the inside out, can seem almost impossible. What are some alternatives or some solutions?
Well, so when we talk about like changing it from the inside out, right? Some of the things that I see is that they hire more black, people of color to become police officers, but by the time they become police officers, they're indoctrinated into a system
Wow.
that 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 is anti them.
Mm,
So they're spent so many times. Like I said, I did 17 years, so 17 years you have a lot of you get to learn a lot in that 17 years, and
yeah,
to be successful you kind of have to follow through on things that are really hurtful for your community.
yeah,
So a lot of officers of color indoctrinate into that system, and it becomes a part of them, and they believe that what they're doing is right,
wow,
because the other group have believed that they style of policing have been right. So when black officers do become the officers, they start to assimilate to that culture. So you don't really get much change by switching the colors of police officers. You really get changed by switching the policies of policing. So the flawed idea of, hey, we need more black officers or we need more Latino officers, that you could throw that right out the window, in my opinion.
right.
You need good policies to help officers understand, or even understand the effect of what arresting does to a community, and better ways to help a community. So better policies
Excellent. Very good. Better policies, enforcement of those policies,
and enforcement,
resources,
accountability of those policies. Yes, absolutely.
accountability, resources to support the new policies, and a lot of training.
Yes.
Sounds like it's a place we can start. And lastly, as we're coming to a close, I know one of the major issues have been distrust between communities of color and police officers. What could we do to establish or restore? Is there any hope in restoring trust? Can we do that? And if so, what does it look like?
It looks like treating communities the same. So trust is when you treat communities the same. And in the instance where I spent many of my a lot of my career in NYPD, communities aren't treated the same. So if there's a crime in a white neighborhood, the crime is solved. You know, they put the resources, they solve the crime, but they don't attack the neighborhood for that crime being committed. Whereas in the black neighborhood, if there's a crime committed, the whole neighborhood suffers for that one crime that's committed. The officers go around, they summons, they arrest, they do this low quality of life enforcement in those neighborhoods where they don't do it in other neighborhoods, and and that and that's the difference the community feel.
Oh,
Our communities feel it in our pockets.
yeah,
We feel it when we constantly getting stopped. We're constantly getting
yeah,
ticketed. We feel we feel these things financially.
yeah,
Whereas where you have crime in another neighborhood, same crime, they don't feel it in their pockets.
yeah,
They don't feel it by losing members of their community to petty crimes being arrested for. So if
yeah,
we're policed fairly, that's a way you build trust in the community, knowing that, hey, listen, everyone's being treated this way. It's not just you. Our community feel like we're the only ones being treated this way, which we are.
yeah,
So we want to be policed the same as every other community. You have the so-called this bad apple. Well, get the
mhm.
bad apple and leave the rest of the good apples on the tree.
Excellent. That's so good. Get the bad apple and leave the rest of the good apples on the tree. Very good, and so profound. There's so many it's so layered. We gotta come back on another time because we're coming to a close, but this, conversation, we didn't even really do a deep dive. We just put our foot in the water and said, "Hey, it's cold," but we didn't even go deep, deep as we could. So, but this has been so inspiring, and just eye-opening for so many of us that are listening and will listen to later on. I know many questions will rise, many different, um, just responses and reactions because these issues are real. They have affected so many people's lives around this nation, and the issues are so deep rooted. They're embedded in the culture of our nation, and our policies, like you mentioned. They're embedded in the psyches, not just of the police officers, but also of the communities where the trust has been torn, that we can't trust, and you're not for us, and you're doing this. Um, and on the other end, that police officers, the indoctrination that you talked about, have adopted and have almost taken on as a part of their DNA, as a part of who they are. So there's so much work that needs to be done. Not enough to talk about, certainly in 30 minutes, but I think we have touched on some really important topics. So in coming to a close, if there's any last words that you want to leave with us, we'd love to hear them.
I don't have any last words, but I thank you. I do. I thank you for having me on today. I enjoyed the conversation, and I will answer any questions. You could send email, or we could talk about them another time.
Absolutely. That's great. We appreciate you so much, for your willingness, again, for serving, and now for coming to the other side of social work. So we're really excited to be bringing you on board this fall. I know you're going to do incredible work with our students. I know they'll love you dearly. You'll learn lots on the other side, and a lot of those alternative solutions and programs. You'll get to see how it's done. So we're excited to have you on board, and we're looking forward to it. So
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you. And thank you all for tuning in and for watching for these 34 minutes. We're on every Thursday for Fireside Chats, talking about community issues and things that matter most to us, our families, and our children. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel at iRace.org. Don't forget to also subscribe to our ATL Rise podcast. Every Friday, new episodes are released. Tomorrow, Friday, August 4th, we have an incredible episode coming to you about how to serve people in a way that's humble, and with empathy. and how to adopt that model across different industries. So please go ahead and subscribe to our ATL Rise podcast on all major podcast platforms. We'll be back next week, Thursday. Love you all, and we'll see you soon. Stay tuned.